looking at thanks, Mane, which is looking at a lot of these questions around the new global capitalism, around some of the more novel, maybe when we disagree with that assessment, but innovative concepts of how we can liberate capitalism from its political constraints. And then before that, the author of Globalists, probably the greatest history of neoliberalism, intellectual history of neoliberalism, but I think giving us a really rich theoretical set of tools to make sense of what global capitalism is in general. Quinn is now over at the Party School of Global Studies at Boston University, and you can read his work not just in these books, but very regularly in publications like the New Statesman, like the New York Times. I think we featured a piece from Quinn there, but there's a wealth of kind of more popular writing, and he provides us to kind of make sense of the high tides of economic transformations today. So thank you, Quinn. I'm going to pass you the mic, and we've got this session of time. I think Quinn's planning to speak for about 45 minutes. He's got a set of slides he'll walk us through, and then I'll be working in the chat to collect messages, to collect questions, and as we did last time, we'll pass that set of questions back over to Quinn when he's done with his slides and give him a chance to engage in some of the questions and answers. And as we did last week, we'll take the questions and prepare them again for group discussion in the Telegram chat. So if you're not in the Telegram chat, we encourage you to be in it because it gives us a space to continue these conversations. But I won't waste any more time. So Quinn, thank you so much. Thank you everyone who's joining us from around the world, and I'll pass it over to you.
Great. Thanks a lot, David, and to the whole team for all of your tireless work. I'm a great admirer of everything that Progressive International is doing, and it's a real honor and a pleasure to be part of it in however small a way here. So as David said, I'll be talking about sort of following up from Andres's session last week about global capitalism as such, with one particular way of disorganizing global capitalism, one ideology that exists in a particular phase of global capitalism, which is called neoliberalism. It's a term, as I mentioned in the blurb for today's session, that is often used, but not so often well-defined, and is rightfully sometimes criticized by people in the center and the right as having devolved into a kind of academic curse word or something that left-wingers just hurl at their opponents without much reflection about what it is they actually mean. One of my hopes today is to give you a way to counter that accusation. Should someone tell you that you're just using a meaningless academic curse word, then you can say, no, in fact, I'm using a curse word that we can break down in the following 4 ways, which is about as far as an academic can hope to get the discourse and the debate. But I hope that it will be a bit of an aid in the future. I'm being mindful of talking a little bit more slowly as this is being simultaneously interpreted into Spanish through the wonderful work of our translator and interpreter. So if it seems like I'm beginning to speed up, maybe someone can just give me a note in the chat. So what am I going to talk about in the next 40 minutes or so? First, I want to offer what I see as the 4 primary ways of defining neoliberalism. Then I'm going to home in on one particular way of defining neoliberalism, which is as a particular intellectual movement, to break down further what I see as the primary schools of neoliberal thought. David Adler sort of alluded to this in his introduction, but even within a particular phase of capitalism, you can have multiple ways of organizing capitalism intellectually, and then within that, you can have a further sort of division of often quite violent debates between thinkers about what the most important thing is in any given point to defend capitalism. Is it a focus on money? Is it a focus on the role of the state? Is it a focus on redesigning legal systems? Is it the exercise of pure executive police power to repress insurgent social movements? Is it new hierarchies of race or intelligence? All of these become sort of important questions, as we'll see when we get into the diverse ideologies that neoliberalism itself contains. So let's begin with 4 ways of defining neoliberalism. I think that the most common way that the term is used is as an era of global capitalism. So it's probably familiar to you to hear a sentence that goes something like, we are now in the neoliberal era, or when South America, Africa, Europe entered neoliberalism, or the neoliberal period, X, Y, and Z happened. The question then for historians becomes, when did this supposedly begin, right? Do you date it with important political figures like Margaret Thatcher, Augusto Pinochet, Ronald Reagan? Or do you date it with some structural change? The introduction of floating exchange rates, the turn to more intervention by the IMF and the World Bank in the wake of the third world debt crisis in the 1980s. These then become things that are hotly debated by scholars. When did neoliberalism begin? The problem with that way of defining neoliberalism, to me, is that as soon as you make a statement as large as we have entered the era of neoliberalism, it's very easy to look inside of that if you're critical and point out all the ways that things are not exactly following a neoliberal playbook, right? So it's very common, for example, in the Financial Times, for example, of which I'm an avid reader, for an editorial comment to read something like, leftists say we are in a period of neoliberalism, and yet state budgets keep growing, entitlements are still there, Social Security costs more than ever, there are more and more regulations, the market has not been liberated. And these are fair criticisms. So I think that when one uses this version of neoliberalism as a kind of a way to describe a period of time, you need to prepare yourself for all of the counter arguments you will get. And you need to be sort of well equipped to say, well, here are the most important reasons why I think we can claim that neoliberalism has begun, whether that's falling union density or a rising share of profit going to capital rather than labor. There are ways to define quantitatively as well a kind of shift towards neoliberalism, but we shouldn't take for granted that this is obvious, that so one day everyone woke up in a country or in the world and said, we moved from the golden age of social democracy into an era of neoliberalism. It's a very hotly debated topic. One helpful way to get a bit more of a handle on when neoliberalism might begin is to think about it as a kind of policy package. The most well-known version of this is probably the Washington Consensus, as described by John Williamson now over 30 years ago. His argument there was that within Washington, meaning not just the government of the United States, the State Department and Treasury, but also the IMF and the World Bank, there was a kind of agreement over the sort of policies that governments needed to carry out to achieve growth and stability. Those things are familiar for people, removing tariffs, lowering taxes, creating more security of private contracts, deregulating, liberalizing labor markets, selling off publicly owned goods and assets, opening up your country to more foreign investment. This is a helpful way to describe neoliberalism in the sense that it gives you a kind of laundry list against which you can compare a set of legal practices, right? You can then, if you wanted to, go to look at any particular nation and say, how neoliberal are they, quote unquote? What have they done with their corporate tax rate? What have they done with their ease of opening a new business? And so on. And this is a common practice within the world of neoliberalism and libertarianism. The most well-known A version of this is something called the Index of Economic Freedom, which I encourage people to go and have a look at. It's published every year. It's quite interesting because it's perhaps the kind of purest embodiment of neoliberal ideology, in the sense that it's self-consciously saying democracy doesn't matter. Democracy is not a version of freedom we're interested in here. We're simply interested in ranking the world's nations and territories according to this world where economic freedom is the only thing that actually matters. So it's interesting to look at, among other things, because you get these strange anomalies. For one thing, the number one country for decades is not even a country. It was Hong Kong, which is the reason why the book Crack Up Capitalism that David mentioned begins and ends in Hong Kong, because I think it's an underrated sort of jewel box of neoliberal policy in action, with all of its contradictions as well. But also because if you look at that index of economic freedom, you'll see that when they go back in time, they often give very high rankings to countries under military dictatorships. So for example, when they look at the economic freedom of a place like Guatemala or Honduras in their periods of military dictatorship, they consider it very free economically because of all of these things about low taxation, privatization of state-owned resources, and so on. Some political scientists just use the index of economic freedom as a kind of a proxy for what is neoliberalism. If a country ranks highly, quote unquote, it's neoliberal. If it doesn't, then it's not neoliberal. Now, there, I think, are also problems with this, but it is a defensible methodology for defining the category. A third way of defining neoliberalism, and if you come from sociology or anthropology or, God forbid, the humanities, history, English literature, comparative literature, media studies, you might be more familiar with this idea of neoliberalism as a kind of self-understanding. So people sort of have absorbed neoliberal principles into their very sense of themselves and the way that they interact with one another, the way that they interact with their communities, the way that they think about the collective of the nation or the continent is mediated through an idea of I am a sovereign consumer who is also a bundle of assets that can be used this way, used that way. I can measure my own worth through my number of followers on social media, and then use that to maximize the return on my influence in my friend group, ... So this idea of thinking of ourselves as economic units and perceiving others not through any question of care or mutuality or dependency or solidarity, but simply through competition and hierarchy and domination through the market, is another way that neoliberalism is defined. Neoliberalism as a way of thinking of ourselves as the French philosopher Michel Foucault famously put it, thinking of ourselves as entrepreneurs of the self as such. Again, another one you will encounter as you wander through the discourses of the internet or amongst your friends and social movements and so on. A fourth definition, and this is the one I will now sort of drill down a bit more on, is neoliberalism as a kind of intellectual movement. And when I say intellectual movement, I mean that this is something that can be defined the same way you might understand anarchism, socialism, fascism, liberalism. It has a particular set of central thinkers, core texts. There are important intellectual debates that have cut across the essence of what neoliberalism is at different times. And the ideology has then had influence and effects directly and indirectly into the quote-unquote real world beyond.
Sorry about that, Quinn. One sec.
So this is the fourth way of defining neoliberalism as a kind of, as an ism in the most generic sense that intellectual historians would describe these things, right? So what do I mean when I say that? So this is an approach that some of you may be familiar with, might be even very familiar with. By now, there's quite a large scholarship on neoliberalism as a kind of intellectual movement, but it's mostly associated with the sort of informal gathering of people called the Montpellier Society, which was a gathering of like-minded economists, philosophers, politicians, journalists, a writer or two. Mario Vargas Llosa is an important member of the Montpellier Society, for example. So they met first in Geneva, outside of Geneva in 1947, and tried to figure out what the essence of what this new thing was that they were identifying themselves with. They called it neoliberalism in the 1930s. They called it neoliberalism in the 1940s and early 1950s. But since then, people like, Hayek, Friedman, and others we will discuss in a minute, haven't really used the term for themselves, but I think it still remains quite a helpful term, neoliberalism, to define this set of relatively internal intellectual and political discussions that began here about 70 years ago and continue to the present. It's very interesting just intellectually to study because there are very clear kind of bodies of scholarship and internal discussion associated with what I will describe as the kind of primary schools of neoliberal thought. There is, on the one hand, the Austrian school, identified with Friedrich Hayek, his teacher, Ludwig von Mises, and then the kind of the next generation, Israel Kirzner is an important name, a name that, as some of you might know, has been thrown around more than once by Javier Milei, who is now, I suppose, the first head of state who considers himself part of the Austrian school. The distinctive part of the Austrian school, it's actually a lot more interesting than people often realize, is that it's very skeptical actually about the use of mathematics in economics. It's very skeptical about the use of statistics in mathematics, in economics. Rather, the essence of the Austrian school is the belief that value is subjective. So it's something that people connect themselves to objects and services, and there is no price per se on a particular commodity. It totally depends on how much people want it, what the consumers literally and symbolically invest in the world around them. Therefore, what the market does is it sort of figures out what is in the hearts and minds of a very, very large number of people and mediate it in an almost magical or mystical way through the price system to sort of discover information and discover new knowledge about what people want, what they can do, what they can offer. So the market in Austrian school is a kind of information processor, a large computer as it's sometimes been described, but one that we can't quite ever penetrate to the center of. So Austrians, rather than sort of trying to figure out the economy, quote unquote, are often saying we need to figure out what laws need to be put into place to let this magic of the market unfold. They often have an idea of a kind of, in a way, a minimal vision of what the state should do, because we should be handing over most of the action to the actual economic actors within the market themselves. I can say much more about this in the Q&A, especially in the ways it has transformed over the decades. The book that I've just finished that will come out next year is called Hayek's Bastards, because I think a lot of the politics of the last couple of decades are examples of people being inspired by Hayek, but then taking his ideas in often very novel and frequently disturbing directions. So that's one of the schools of neoliberal thought. Another is the Freiburg School. This is associated with Germans, primarily, if not exclusively. And these were people who were either operating within the Nazi system, or in some cases, like Rübke, had left in dissent against the Nazi system, but who were on the ground after the fall of the Third Reich in 1945 to help implement what they thought was a system that would keep socialism at bay and keep the markets relatively free for private activity, with a relatively large and still large export sector, as West Germany ended up having and Germany has today. So they have much more internally to say. Again, we can return to it in Q&A if you like, but it's maybe useful to point out that people have returned to the so-called ordo-liberal school in recent years because they believe that the principles of antitrust and anti-monopoly that ordo-liberals preached could perhaps be useful today in opposition to things like trade unions, yes, but also the monopolies of tech corporations and the overly large domination of a small number of firms, which is certainly the case in the United States. So once again, there's a kind of perhaps unexpected way that this form of neoliberalism can work against actual existing capitalism, both now and at the moment of its creation in the 1930s and 40s. Perhaps the most famous school of neoliberal thought is the Chicago School. Three of the people here who are most associated with it pictured on their trip to Mont Pelerin: a very young Milton Friedman on the far left, Gary Becker, and Aaron Director, who is well known for creating the law and economics movement in school, which has applied economic thinking and reasoning to the practice of law. So unlike the Austrians, who were very skeptical about using mathematics for economic problems, the Chicago School is sort of defined by this idea that you can use the so-called neoclassical reasoning in application to problems from childbearing to criminality to antitrust to foreign trade questions, to environmental questions. There's often a kind of embrace of the use of mathematics and economics to figure out how a kind of person motivated by self-interest, this famous Homo economicus, would act in any given situation. So when you think of economics in its normal modern form, it's going to be closest to the Chicago School in comparison to the Austrian and German school. Lastly, an influential school of neoliberal thought that has not had much attention until recently and has recently become an object of much attention is the Virginia School, also known as the Public Choice School. The most famous people here are James Buchanan, Gordon Tullock, and Warren Nutter. And they are well known for their emphasis on the importance of constitutions. So their idea that to defend the market, you really need to focus on law. So rather than intervening directly into the distribution process or the production process, you need to create a legal framework that will prevent the government from allocating the resources inside of a particular nation or territory. Melinda Cooper's new book, counter-revolution is a good place to look. On the Virginia School, she shows there, for example, the classic example is California, where in the late 1970s, there was a new law created, which meant that you couldn't raise property taxes to pay for increased costs of social programs without a so-called supermajority. So it is a way of starving out the public sector over time because they don't have the money and they can't raise the revenue to pay for their own promises and their own services. So this, when you think of austerity in its modern form, you might associate it with these kind of constitutional limits on public spending, on raising taxes, on spending more of the public budget on outlays than is permitted. So the balanced budget amendment, which has been introduced now into many countries, is very much a kind of product of the Virginia School and the Chicago School, and really the order liberal school working together. There are, of course, many other schools of neoliberal thought. I can direct you to this book that Dieter Pleva, my collaborator, and I put out a couple of years ago that has really interesting chapters on, Guatemala, Japan, Iceland, Australia, China, Brazil, Turkey, India, all of which sort of show that the history of neoliberalism, even when you look at it as an intellectual movement, isn't just one of diffusion from the Mont Pelerin School in Geneva outwards, but it often is sort of being transformed in moments of contact with different circumstances in different parts of the world. So one of the readings that I assigned for the syllabus, if any of you had a chance to look at that, was a wonderful article by Noor Dados and Raewyn Connell. And they asked the question, where does neoliberalism come from? And they suggest that we shouldn't only focus on ideas sort of emanating from the global north and then being imposed elsewhere, because often, first of all, there are willing collaborators, so to speak, that are already domestic. And the real effects of neoliberal policy are almost always felt in the global south historically than they are in the north. So we should redirect our attention away from a kind of north downwards diffusion and look more at reception and flows that move in the opposite direction. And I simply completely endorse that. And I think that that's, in a way, the future of the scholarship right now is in that very direction, showing how, different actors, whether it's Mexican businessmen or large landowners in India, are often very willing and they desire to kind of accelerate the processes of what we call neoliberalism for their own reasons, and they often have their own explanation of why this should take place. That brings me to the school that I discuss in my book, Globalists, which David mentioned. And it's a term that had sort of been floating around, but I kind of also tried to give it more meat and give it a more coherent storyline and cast of characters. That's the Geneva School. So one of the arguments, or I suppose the argument of globalists, is that we shouldn't think of neoliberalism intellectually or practically as being mostly about national policy and then eventually scaling up to global policy. Rather, the main thinkers of neoliberalism have been very concerned with the global and planetary scale from the very beginning. So after the Great Depression in the 1930s, what they really wanted to do was restore what they saw as a much more unified global market in the late 19th century and the early 20th century that they saw had been shattered by nationalism, protectionism, fascism on the right, and socialism on the left. So this is a kind of genealogy of the globalists, meaning the people who primarily began with a vision of economic order at the planetary level, and then saw nations as existing within that order, often as a kind of a problem. So nations, as I show, are both useful as places to produce new forms of competition between different economic units, but also potentially problematic because national sovereignty can sometimes stand in the way of the more efficient or productive use of the world's resources. So the globalist problem or conundrum is how to kind of find, as I describe in that book, a guardian for the world economy. And this begins to bring me towards the last part of my lecture, where I'm going to talk about, where are we going now, right? And I think that if we give ourselves a kind of a timeline about who has been the guardian for the world economy in the last 100 years, we'll have a good sense of who is the candidate for the present, if any. So historians looking at the 19th century, 150 years ago plus, would say that the kind of conditions for the existence of the globalized world economy were the importance of the City of London, meaning the banking core of the capital city of England, through which almost all, a great number of the world's financial transactions were moving, whether it was to get insurance, bills of exchange, to store savings, to float new bonds and stocks. All of the world's allocation of money and capital was happening through the switchboard of the City of London. And arguably the British Empire, too, was then militarily playing the role of keeping markets open, opening them up where they were closed. Think of the Opium Wars in China. Think of the opening of Japan by the Americans. There was a concerted effort to combine sort of military power and financial services in a way that protected, with many exceptions, a kind of open door policy for the international division of labor. After the First World War, this was very much broken up. A lot of the people who had been cooperating were now at war. You needed to knit it back together. And the League of Nations was seen for a time as a potential candidate to kind of restore the united world economy. And the BIS, or the Bank for International Settlements, which still exists, still very important, kind of underrated, I think, as an actor in maintaining connection between diverse parts of the world. Jamie Martin's book, The Meddlers, is a good one to look at for more of the specific interwar history. It's really the topic of his book. After this Second World War, GATT, which is sort of the first run of the World Trade Organization, is introduced as an informal way to allow countries to negotiate about lowering their tariff walls over time to have freer markets and freer exchange. In my book, I talk about the European Court of Justice, again, I think underrated, as a way of opening up markets through the process of European integration. So as countries joined the European Economic Community and later Economic Community and later European Union, they were compelled to open up their internal domestic markets to competition from other member states, which meant, of course, cheaper products in many cases, but then also the loss of employment and jobs in often long-standing industries, and the concentration of a lot of the economic power of the continent in the more powerful players like Germany. The European Court of Justice is kind of the symbolic actor that makes that integration, negative integration of markets possible. Something else that might be familiar to people in the audience or in the chat are so-called bilateral investment treaties. International investment law in general was a way to make foreign investors feel more confident that their investments in countries that were not their own would be respected by domestic governments, that those nations would not strip them of their assets that they owned, would not, take over the mines, take over the plantations, take over the harbors. So they would literally sign a treaty saying that if the country somehow expropriates or confiscates or takes the property of this other investor, then the country will be forced to pay back the investor in the first place. This has often been described as a way of putting the rights of corporations over the rights of states. Another term you might have heard is ISDS, or investor-state dispute settlements. Very much in the news recently because of, for progressive international folks, because of what's going on in Honduras in the wake of the ZD scandals, where the libertarian investors are suing the sovereign state of Honduras for all of the money that they're claiming that they have lost, not just now, but in their future profits, which are now being taken from them. So these are obviously, a set of institutional arrangements that make it more likely that capital will flow over borders, that make it more likely that someone looking to open a factory will be able to find, the cheapest territory and the cheapest labor force to work for them. And it's a way of legalizing, through new forms of regulation, a kind of layer of law above that of the nation that both makes certain things possible for national actors, but then also makes other things impossible. That's, I think, a helpful way to think about neoliberalism in action. It's not pure punishment. It's not pure repression and domination. It makes some things possible and it makes other things impossible. And in terms of the outcomes, it's almost always increasing polarization of wealth, and with more accumulating at the top and at the bottom. Two other obvious examples here would be mega regional trade treaties, things like NAFTA, and then the World Trade Organization. Now, the last one brings us to the question of where we are now. Because in my lifetime, certainly, and probably in anyone's lifetime on this call, no matter how old they are, I doubt we have any people in their 90s on the call, the future of the global market as a kind of integrated whole is very much in question right now. So I think it's worth ending the discussion with a brief sketch of how we might think about this as a sort of a problem of past, present, and future. We've already talked a little bit about this in terms of the past, and I get into these categories more in my book. So check out Globalists if you want to have more of a background on this. But in short, the idea of imperium and dominium draws on the idea of Roman law, the idea being that imperium is the rule of states and dominium is the rule of private actors. So you can think of it as, countries and property. And much of the problem of the world economy is mediating this, making sure that nations don't claim too much control over private property, and private property is able to express its dominance over national sovereignty. The next set of categories there come from, one is from the Austrian school, one is my own coinage. Catalaxy is the Austrian economics way of describing that magic of the market. The way that if given enough legal protection in space, the price mechanism will discover information and create connections between people that didn't exist already, and it will have a peaceful outcome over time. I say encasement there because my point is that that doesn't happen in a vacuum. That doesn't happen in empty space. That happens under conditions of great legal oversight and legal direction. And rather than the liberation of markets or the unfettering of markets, as it's often described, I think we should think of the encasement of markets. And that doesn't mean that this is purely negative, but it just suggests that this is a very much an active process. Neoliberalism requires not just a rollback of the state, but as people like Jamie Peck have been reminding us for about 30 years now, a rollout of a new kind of state too. Xenos rights I put up here also kind of for fun because it's a funky term that I came up with in globalist. But xenos, xenoi in Greek are the stranger friends. And I think that, again, this is both good and can be bad, but one of the neoliberal principles is that foreigners as kind of commercial actors should be granted the same level of rights as domestic actors, which is the essence of something like international investment law. You need a way of guaranteeing the rights of aliens or foreigners as commercial investors and employers, or else people will not trust the process of national investment. So how is that world sort of being challenged at the moment? These are probably come as no surprise to people who have been paying attention the last few years. But one is clearly the rise of China, which has been able to, I would say, masterfully kind of use the spaces of the neoliberal international economic law system without absorbing all of those principles internally. But in the process, of course, have had a vertical ascent, interrupted recently, of course, by some internal issues that we can talk about a bit more in the chat if you like. But basically, the Chinese challenge has led the United States and the European Union afterwards to sort of question its previous commitment to a legalized global regime of international free trade, and have allowed the language of geoeconomics and economic sovereignty to return now at a very, very pronounced level. A lot of that debate has happened around so-called supply chains, and the problem of chips or semiconductors are kind of have become iconic for this, in the fear that the United States, especially now with the hype around AI and other countries, will lose their competitive advantage if they have to rely on components from one particular place, whether it's Taiwan or the source of lithium itself in places like Chile. So there's an attempt to kind of nearshore or onshore much of the production process, even for very high-end things like semiconductors. And this is moving against the flow of international division of labor from the last 25 years, potentially leading to some beginnings of so-called deglobalization. Thirdly, there's the question of carbon. I use that as a kind of shorthand for the clean, just energy transition and the hope of some nations to move towards a kind of a net zero economic model, which in many cases has worked against global integration. So it's a complicated story, of course, but the EU, for example, has introduced so-called carbon border adjustment taxes, which mean that they place extra taxes on incoming imports based on how much carbon they think has been kind of produced in the production of those products. So this, again, could have a fragmenting effect on integrated global markets and could thus work against the principle of neoliberal globalism. Where might this go in the future? Well, the category of territory famously was sort of assumed to be obsolete around 1990. Much of the discussion in the 1990s was about the death of distance, the end of space as a limiting factor, container ships, and broadband internet telecommunications meant you could work from anywhere, you could oversee production and work from anywhere, you could split up the production of even simple products, scatter them all over the globe, and still be able to produce them profitably. There was basically no transport or shipping costs left to speak of because of the ease of the global shipping network and so on. It seems that that's now moving in the opposite direction, that there's a real return to the importance of territory for a range of different reasons, which we can talk about more if you like in the Q&A. Secondly, I have this category of triage. I think some of you may be familiar with this term in the practice of triage, but if there's a, let's say, earthquake or a fire, and there are many victims, the ambulance who arrives on the scene will first have to figure out who needs to be taken care of first. So there's literally a kind of color-coded tags that are put on the different bodies of the people who are injured to say, okay, this person needs help right now, this person can be left for a while, this person can be left for a few hours, and so on. I think that especially in 2020 and COVID, we got a sense of how quickly this logic of triage can kick in. And, unfortunately, we discovered that the tagging of bodies, so to speak, according to risk, was still very much filtered through old hierarchies of race, civilization, and wealth, so that, the countries of the white North cared for their own first, and even within their own countries cared for their wealthiest first. And the scale of abandonment went down to parts of the world that were suddenly left, entirely without vaccines and PPE and so on. So the ideology of globalization and neoliberalism in its popular form is one of horizontal flat relations, that everyone can be part of the market, everyone can do their part, not everyone will be rewarded, but everyone is integrated. A crisis moment like COVID, and there will be many more, shows that that integration can suddenly snap apart very quickly, and old versions of racial and linguistic and historical bonds and communities will reassert themselves. That's mostly important. That's mostly, an urgent issue for those people who don't have those well-equipped and well-resourced communities to flee to. And I have this word here, thet, which is a Greek word for the kind of person without, like a person without a family, clan or family. It comes from, in this case, the science fiction author Neil Stephenson. I use this in my new book to talk about the problem of sort of statelessness and collectivelessness. And I think the plight of Gaza right now and the Palestinian people shows us extremely graphically about where the kind of discourse of a market that can embrace everyone completely breaks down, and certain populations can be seen as forgettable and disposable and open to being sacrificed by the wealthiest powers in the world. So this is something that, should obviously take up most of our attention and our concern in the decades that are to come. Yeah, I think I'll leave it at that. Put up my favorite picture of Hayek cutting a birthday cake with a katana on the way out, and then just be happy to respond to the questions that you have, which I think David will be collecting and then conveying to me.
Yeah, we've got, time for about 5 questions. So I thought we could just really run through Kirsten's question, Mariana's question, Salvador's question, Steve's question, which are all excellent. So to start with Kirsten's question. So is there a consensus on the goal of neoliberalism? Obviously, you've walked us through different ways of its implementation or its form, its But is the idea to maximize wealth for as many people globally as possible, or to create global flows of capital that generate profits for corporations or shareholders? And what's really in the minds of a lot of the authors and architects that you've outlined?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, there's the title of a book, which I think is excellent, is The Realm of the Lesser Evil. And I think that the best way to understand neoliberalism as a political philosophy, and I would say this also of economic liberalism in the 19th century before it, is it's best thought, needs to be thought about in relation to other challengers. And lesser evil, because the real point of neoliberalism was to prevent the rise of the challenges of collectivism on the right, in the form of fascism, and socialism on the left. So the goal of neoliberalism, if you had to put it, I think, and I've put it this way before, is to protect capitalism from its enemies, and often to protect capitalism from democracy. The way that this ideology becomes explicit in certain moments of crisis is very striking. So I think I'm probably not the only one. I know I've been posting about this on Twitter, about the way that the Financial Times, for example, has absolutely gone wild about, Mélenchon and the new Popular Front in France. They are a great newspaper and they report relatively objectively, for the most part, compared to many of the others. But when this fear of a leftist party having any credible challenge, whether it's Corbyn or Mélenchon, suddenly all manners of kind of fears are conjured up, and some of them are made up, but simply the idea of the disruption of stable market economy through tax and spend fiscal policies, suddenly the ideology exposes itself. So to the question of, what do the neoliberals want? Well, I think they want to preserve the interconnections of a global economy against what they see as its most existential challenges. Beyond that, the goal is not, I think, necessarily to sort of maximize global well-being, even sort of on an average level. That's not something that's actually usually mentioned internally, if you want to think about this like an intellectual historian. It's more that they want to act as the guardians of a holistic unity that is the planetary economy, and with the belief that with all of its negative side effects, keeping an international division of labor intact is the best way to preserve humanity's future.
Thanks, Quinn. Here's the second question from Mariana. So how do the current discourses of neoliberalism, from figures like Milei or Bolsonaro and those of the schools of thought related to globalism, are articulated? So Milei's fully adopted the anti-globalism, anti-WEF, et cetera narrative while promoting his version of the Austrian school. I wonder if this could be understood as a new turn in the neoliberal wheel, or we should just see it as an opportunistic pseudo ideology.
Yeah, I mean, I find the fact that Bolsonaro and Milei show up at Davos and get, hearty rounds of applause to be kind of all the evidence we need in this direction, right? I mean, Klaus Schwab himself is very open also about welcoming Trump at Davos, which is only a contradiction if you think about it for, less than a minute. And as soon as you think about it for longer than a minute, you say, well, in this model of, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, then even if this guy is spouting a bunch of kooky stuff about anti-globalism, Milei's main fear is collectivism. He thinks that everyone from Christian Democrats to communists are all collectivists, and that we need to sort of build a front against them. And he was in Davos saying, you all in the audience are my common colleagues in this fight, this existential fight against the left and the collectivists. We're very, very, very broadly conceived. So the fact that they dabble in, outrageous conspiracy theories, I think really is the side note. The important thing is that they understand their role as heads of state, whether it's Milei or Bolsonaro, as clearing away the obstacles for the ever tighter integration of their national economies into, global circuits of investment, extraction, profit maximization, and foreign investment, right? I mean, this is what they understand as their goal. So I think anyone still kind of fooled by the idea that they're anti-establishment candidates or anti-caste candidates is, that I don't think we should be that naive anymore. So these strange bedfellows, they get a lot stranger than that, right? I mean, they get a lot stranger than the figure of a Millet who's sitting there quoting chapter and verse, Hayek's mentor. I think that it gets more challenging if you ask about people like Viktor Orban. He is a bit more of a consequential protectionist around certain parts of his economy than someone like Milei or Bolsonaro is. He's talking about breaking away from the legal integration of the European Union system, but in doing so, he's making links to Korea, making links to China. So it's actually kind of more globalizing economically than many of the other European powers.
Quinn, there's a great question here after this about the role of the great financial crisis of 2007, 2008 as a critical juncture in your story of neoliberalism. So Salvatore is asking, is this just a bump in the road that was paved over by QE infinity, or something more fundamental that might have ushered in a new era of capitalism, or even, as someone suggested, the rise of a new economic system altogether?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is extremely important. I think that it's important in retrospect because of the kind of squandered opportunities of that kind of zero interest rate environment, right? It was, I think, genuinely a time where an opening had been created by the kind of financial firefighting of the American Federal Reserve, and the Bank of England and the European Central Bank, that somehow a luckier, I don't want to say a better organized, I don't want to say a less divisive, I would just want to say a luckier left could have sort of made better use of, because the conditions that existed there for large investment projects, for the kind of actual leveling up that otherwise British conservatives and the like only give lip service to, were genuinely there. But as it was, the sort of momentum was seized by those who would take the opening of QE infinity and simply turn it into the amplification of asset prices for the people who already had assets, and to make an even more unequal system than what had existed before. So the chances of redistribution, which were maybe open through fiscal policy there, have obviously now closed. And it does feel like a real missed opportunity. There is also a kind of, this is the origin of the kind of pseudo division between sort of more centrist neoliberals and more right-wing populist neoliberals, because the firefighting of central bankers required them to do a bunch of things that looks from the outside like very irresponsible actions, right? I mean, the bailing out of banks, the saving of all these zombie corporations, the bailing out of countries in the case of the European Union. All of these actions produced kind of backlashes, from the Tea Party to the Alternative for Germany Party to all kinds of right-wing austerity neoliberal parties. You could say, we are just the playthings of the central bankers. But in the end, I think now that after COVID, there's been kind of obviously a U-turn in monetary policy and a return to concerns about inflation. Now there can be a kind of like a closing of the ranks again, actually. Someone like a Larry Summers and a Javier Milei can kind of agree about something now, whereas, in 2012, they wouldn't have. One of them, Summers, would have been saying, let's use this opportunity. He was actually much more kind of open to the idea of running the economy hot and so on then. And now with the kind of turn back to inflation fears, you have once again a common front, I think, of the centrist central banker types and the populist, firebrand types.
So I want to close, because I know you've got to run, Quinn, by combining a couple of the questions here, because I think a lot of the questions are pointing in the same direction, which is really about an alternative vision to contest neoliberalism, something that's more humanistic, that conceives of human nature in a different way, that can give us, I guess, some hope in our challenges. Obviously, we're convening this as a progressive international, so we're very interested in thinking about what might be a countervailing ideological force and intellectual tradition on which we can rely. Obviously, you mentioned 2008 as a kind of missed opportunity. But I thought we could close the session really with you reflecting a bit on, where do we go from here? We've seen the mutations of neoliberalism, its zombie forms today, long after many people have proclaimed it dead, and the ways in which markets are changing. But none of those ways seem to suggest, in your realistic, if pessimistic view, that we might be in some better, more responsible, more climate conscious era. So what do you think can guide us in this course, and us in our general internationalist struggle to take on a lot of these traditions that are pernicious in their social outcomes and ignorant of their climate implications?
Yeah, I mean, for a lot of years, people writing about this neoliberal thought collective and the Mont Pelerin Society would always come to the same conclusion. And they say, well, we need a Mont Pelerin Society of the left. This is something that Phil Murawski had said more than once, and Nick Cernacek in their great book on platform capitalism talked about. And the assumption there was that we need to basically have, these think tank brain trusts of like-minded progressives and even radicals and left-wing socialists who can, develop a compelling worldview and ideology, and then even a set of policies of their own that can then just be rolled out and unleashed on the world once they find, a politician, a head of state, a prime minister, a president who's going to be their kind of locomotive. You just sort of link up and then smash it through, and then, voila, you'll have a post-neoliberal socialist economy. There's an amazing way in which that was actually tried. Bidenomics, not something we're all talking about much these days for many reasons. That's the closest we've actually had to, in the North, that I can think of, to what I just described, which was a ring of progressive policy think tanks, Roosevelt Institute, Center for American Progress, the Law and Political Economy undertaking, all of which managed to get their people in really high-level appointments in the Biden presidency, and were able to advise on and even assemble like pretty extraordinary proposals and spending packages and bills. And we're even able to get those like all the way out to Congress, the floor of Congress, and up for a vote. Most of it got shredded, right? Most of it didn't make it through. What did make it through, interestingly enough, hasn't really broken through politically or mentally for average American voters, or even, let alone like working class members of the American working class. So the question of like, what should we be doing when we look at the history of neoliberalism in response, I think, has been at least answered in that particular case in the negative. Well, don't just do that. How has the kind of lineage of neoliberalism been effective in places like Argentina or Brazil or El Salvador? Well, there, they've worked in a very different way. It actually hasn't just been top-down intellectuals hooking up with politicians, but they've been working in the chaotic space of TikTok and Twitter and YouTube and producing a kind of youthful, often kind of playful, viral ambience and mood and vibe of anti-authoritarianism and dissent and kind of opposition to the establishment, which, although I would argue almost totally hollow in reality, has been persuasive enough that you have large groups of young people supporting someone who almost surely will make their adulthood worse and their country worse, and yet created a kind of a subculture effect. So that, I think, is interesting, because then you see the kind of combination of, there is some books there, there's some thinking there, but then there's also just like a fun scene and a mood and like catchy personalities and jokes and like something you want to stream for 2 hours and so on. So that, I think, it's still there, the potential, I think, to follow, ironically, following these grizzled old neoliberals to where they ended up, which is like plugging into youth mediated subculture, which on the left, we have the advantage of also having a kind of protest culture and a social movement culture waiting there too, which is, a site of great excitement and energy and a way to kind of bring people in. So the situation is not as one-sided as I think it can seem, right? I mean, if you look at the landscape today, Lula's in power in Brazil. Labour has just won a landslide victory in Britain. Yes, with a total centrist who purged out everyone who was ever associated with Corbyn, including Corbyn himself. But look at the vote numbers, right? He actually didn't get that much more many more votes than Corbyn did. So no one predicted this. It doesn't necessarily mean things are going in our direction, quote unquote. Might be the opposite. Someone just posted fewer than Corbyn, right? Fewer than Corbyn. But it just means that we're in a very volatile and dynamic political environment. I haven't checked the news today if we have any exit poll news yet from France, but that Macron did not predict that this is what's happening, what was going to happen when he called the snap election. Nobody thought that the left could put all of their differences aside and unite in the way that they have. It's quite impressive. In the United States, we have a president who is, all but non-functional, who may be compelled to step aside, leaving a space for question mark. I mean, we don't actually know for sure, right? There's just like a huge amount of openness in the political situation right now. So it's not a moment where I think we should say, well, one version of organizing global political economy and political outcomes has swung to another. It's not, we had the market, now we're going to the state, or there was a COVID moment of state power and now we're swinging back to the market. It's nothing as simplistic as that. Like, we need to do nothing more than to just remain on our toes, remain highly informed, and remain open to strange openings and strange sort of combinations of politics, which maybe didn't think like they were going to combine in the first place. And that is, if you want the kind of message of what neoliberalism has been good at, it's that they haven't said, here is our core thing and it can't move. They've actually mutated, they've found new allies and bedfellows, and they've decided that if you want to protect capitalism from democracy, then you need to take many strategies. Similarly, now, I think if we want to overcome capitalism through democracy, we'll need to be open to all of the kind of strategies that we can avail ourselves of.
Thank you so much, Quinn. Thank you, everyone, for these terrific questions. We can obviously continue this debate, not just in the Telegram channel that we've opened up, but in future classes. And I'm sure Quinn will ping me over based on our discussion here. He usually sends me FT links complaining about whatever happens to be in the financial press. But it's so extra thanks to our Spanish interpreters who've been heroically carrying this, and we will get you.
Sorry.
No. And I was the one who was speaking too fast, but get you over links in case you want to watch this again, or in case you want to share this with another person who's enrolled in the course but couldn't make it today. You know where to find us if you have any questions. But big thanks and round of applause for Quinn for making time on the weekends to join us, and thank you all for being here. Obviously, meetings,
David, can I just say I want to thank you too, but can you just somehow take a transcript of the chat? I didn't have a chance to see what everything was unfolding as I was talking, but I'd love to see what responses people had. Questions
definitely.
that I wasn't able to. All right, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, Mane, is that we last week as well, we collected the questions and kind of put them over. So I'm happy to send them over to you. And if you have additional responses that you want to just type up, and we can send over to everyone in the course. So I hope everyone has a lovely morning, evening, afternoon. We'll all be watching these French results roll in, but definitely looks like a moment of opening, of confusion, of conflict, of dispute for power, and therefore dispute for political economy. So thank you all, and see you next week.
All right. Bye.